Hello and welcome to Mandibil, and welcome to the next part in my deconstruction series on Keith Frankish's lecture series on illusionism. And we are still in lecture 3, the case for illusionism, and more particular in the 1 hour and 40, around 1:45, 1 hour and 45 minutes into the lecture. And as I pointed out in my recent deconstruction parts, I'm sort of losing oversight of what we're doing here. It seems to me it's bloated, and at the same time, he's repeating the same sentences about the same thing over and over again. So I'm confused about why is it because there's something I overlooked? Why is he seemingly repeating himself, or is it just me who hasn't fathomed the depth of this and understand it as repeating? Now I'm so confident in myself, my own philosophy and ability to understand things, that I am confident to say that it's a very convoluted way he's presenting this, and he sort of keeps repeating himself, maybe just with a slightly different terms and slightly different sentences and so on, right? And also he brought in something, the sixth sense for consciousness. I don't like that at all, right? That approaches mysticism and all sorts of things. And the simple and primitive relation, sort of talking down to people that you're just a simple, simpleton. You can't handle the truth, right? So you haven't discovered that you don't need those weird qualia. You are not on my level, sort of. I'm sort of dramatizing it a bit, right? But it very quickly starts to sound something like that, in my opinion. That's not necessary. How can such relation be incorporated from a naturalistic picture of the world? But again, it's implicitly suffers from naive realism, right? The naturalistic picture of the world. What is the world? If he's talking about his own experiences, well, he can't just refer to the world as something as if I understand it, because then he's locked within his own experiences, right? He can't tell me about something that he doesn't have access to, because I must be outside that world he's referring to. Now, if he's referring to some outside world, a world that is outside the world, if that is outside his own experience, and I am in that world, how does he have access to it if it's not a part of his experiences, right? It's this paradox within the thinking that needs to be addressed, right? And because he doesn't address it, he thinks he needs to refute qualia, right? If he can't get to this, it doesn't really matter what this whole thing ends up with claiming, right? Because he hasn't seen all ends of this, right? He is suffering from the consequences of a paradox built into his fundamental understanding of his experience, right? Okay, so we're jumping into the next slide. I think I've jumped a little ahead in this, if I'm not mistaken. I think that we are getting close to the next slide here. So, and fine with me. I would like to get on with this. It's like if you invited somebody to come and tell about their journey to whatever, the Maldives, right? And you expect, getting a half-hour rundown of the event, and the focusing on the core experiences, and the hotel, and then what you get is somebody showing their awful, boring, tourist photographs of all sorts of seemingly inconsequent subjects in the photographs while they're talking to you for 6 hours, right? That's how I feel. No, I don't want you to tell me about every fucking breakfast you have, or whether the egg was this or the egg was that. I would like to get to the core of the experience, right? I can't handle this library of words in order for you to get to some kind of core argument that seemingly is very important, because you're sitting there spending hours upon hours upon hours on telling me about it, right? And it's seemingly you call yourself an illusionist. So it's sort of at the base of your whole existence, right? And then you spend 6 hours trying to convey it. You need to be fucking sharp, man, right? It's like selling a business idea, right? You need to get to the core idea very quickly in order for those who might want to invest in it to see, yeah, there's something to this. This might actually be interesting. Give me the crux of it very quickly, and then maybe a few details following this, right? So that I have an overview and understanding on where we're going with this, right? This is not going to sell, right? I'm not buying this. It's so bloated that I am refusing to buy it, no matter how good that argument may be. I have to reject it on this basis alone, right? It's annoyingly stupid that these kinds of, and I don't want to sound like these Nietzsche had these ideas of the middleman. I forget the exact term, right? But these or the last man, I think, or the slave, right? I'm not a slave, but these people who want to drag other people down to their level, so to say. They don't like the Übermensch. They don't like the feeling of somebody being better or superior or anything like that. I'm not in a camp where I try to drag people down just to drag them down. But if their arguments or the way they present their arguments is fucking annoyingly stupid and incoherent and contradictory and bloated and so on, I'm going to say, don't take this shit seriously, man, right? I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Do a deconstruction yourself, please. I would gladly sit through it, right? That's 6 hours I would love to sit through, right? I'm done this for 20 odd hours now, right? The deconstruction is much more cumbersome than this. But it wouldn't be 20 odd hours long, this deconstruction, if he had presented this in 45 minutes. And he actually might have success in convincing me maybe at least to some extent, right? Now I'm just going to say this sucks, man, right? And the Nietzsche thing. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in pulling people down. I am, back in the day, I remember at some time I was on a university at some point studying, computers or programming, more correctly, right? And there was one guy. He was just so brilliant at this, right? I struggled with these programming languages, and I sort of later figured out this is not the avenue I'm going down, right? I'm simply not good enough for this, right? And that's also something that is fine to, I think that is an underrated feature or that you should be able to say to yourself, well, I'm not good enough for this. I should find something that I'm better, because I'm not going to be one of those who people would want to hire to do this kind of job or whatever, right? But I remember distinctly that I was struggling with some of this programming, and he could just sort of, well, have you tried doing this, right? And then it worked, right? I would sit there for hours upon hours struggling with putting together a set of code that worked, and he would have just read it the day before, and then he had all the commands in the head, and he could just try to put it together this way. 5 minutes, he had a well-functioning, optimized program that was, with indents, and everything was just shiny and perfect. And I was like, this is fucking annoying. This is an annoying person. But it was me who was being annoyed. He wasn't annoying. He was just fucking great at what he was doing, right? And the point of mediocre personalities is they want to pull those people down so they don't illuminate to you how mediocre you are at this particular thing, right? But I don't find myself to be mediocre in philosophy, at least, right? There's a lot of other things that I'm not good at, right? And I will immediately admit that. And not that I need to admit it, but you know what I mean, right? But that's why my mind has been focusing on philosophy for at least 10 years now, right? And I can't get away from it. I need it as I need my daily bread and my morning espresso and so on, right? I need philosophy. I need to get a grip on this thing. I just can't help it, right? And it's a passion almost. It's almost beyond passion, right? It's not just a passion, you know. I am also a philatelist. I'm interested in stamps and postal history. Not in the way that most people are. You're just one of each stamp into an album and that's it. I'm going more into history and, you know, telling stories with stamps and exhibiting and such. And that's a passion I've had since the 70s when I was a, you know, young boy, right? I need that passion. I don't want to live without it. If I lose the passion, so be it. I still have the passion, fine, right? So I'm living with the passion, so to say. And maybe I'm cycling a bit here, but what I wanted to get to is, if you think that I'm just out to bash academia because I feel insignificant or low self-esteem or anything like. I couldn't care less about Keith Frankish as an individual. I don't care about him as an individual. I care about the arguments, right? Now, I might be a little outspoken in my way of calling people stupid and so on. Maybe it's a bit over the top at times, right? But it's because it's my passion. And it's annoying to me that this, what's the word? That these people who do philosophy, they don't seem to understand the importance of what they're doing. Right? You know, Plato said, if kings can't be philosophers, philosophers need to be kings, right? That if anything, at least, it points out that there is an importance to philosophy, right? To doing philosophy and presenting philosophy and establishing conclusions about this philosophy, right? From this philosophy. I mean, a guy like Nietzsche had a big impact on the world for good or for bad, right? His sister, you know, turned him into a Nazi sympathizer or something like that, right? So they just twisted around the words in order to make it sound like he was a Nazi, right? So you have to be careful what you're doing, but you shouldn't be afraid to go out and do it, right? I would like to see more people criticizing academia. It's like they feel that they're superior, they're beyond, beyond good or bad, right? To quote Nietzsche. Good or evil, I don't remember the title exactly, but beyond good or evil. They think they're sort of above people, right? Also like, Bernardo Castro, who claims to, I just took this PhD in philosophy because I would like people, somebody said, well, you don't have a PhD in philosophy, so why should we take you seriously? And then said, okay, then I guess I'll do a PhD in philosophy, whatever it takes, 5 years, 6 years, whatever, to be a PhD in philosophy. Give me a fucking break, right? The academics is in such a minority in general, population of the world, that why would you need to be an academic in order to tell people about philosophy? Is it because you only want to convince other academics? And you think, okay, if I convince the academics, then everything is solved. No, it's the herd out there. It's all the slave mentality and all the last men, right? They have to be somehow convinced about a good kind of philosophy. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Otherwise, you are just appealing to authority. You are appealing to, yes, if I can convince my fellow academics about this, then we'll just grab the guns of the state and force people to live according to our new rules, which is sort of the totalitarian state of the Platonic Republic, right? So I like that they are sort of opening up, at least. I guess they feel that they need to, because there are people like me and maybe a few others who are actually doing some kind of philosophy that is decentralized, right? It is not gate-kept by the state or government and so on, because these people are in the pocket of the state, no matter how you turn it around, right? They're not going to criticize the state. And those who get to professor, positions in academia, they're not going to be free market advocates, right? They're going to be some half-ass champagne communist, right? Which I suppose this guy is, right? At least some kind of leftist. I don't see any free market notions here, right? They all hate the free market because that's why you have to go and work for a living, right? Why would they want to do that? So I'm rambling a bit here, just off the top of my head, right? But I hope you get my point across. I feel it's necessary. It's also a good way for me to get into the depths of what other people or other philosophical minded people are saying about particular metaphysical stances, right? Because it all starts with metaphysics, and that's always also where I am at this point in my book, which I'm trying to get a grip on, starting up again, right? Writing, it's kind of difficult. I'm still, there's some part of the book where it's sort of it's a sort of conjunction of all things, all sorts of things coming together, and I'm sort of trying to get a good overview of how to approach it. And that's where I stopped when I wrote in the last spurt of, writing, urges, right? And I'm trying to take it up again, right? But I'm also going back, looking from the start and see what I have, honed my thinking in metaphysics in order to the previous parts, making them even clearer, right? So, but it's a good way of getting to the depths of the argument. This is difficult in this case here, right? Because he's so fluffy, right? But at least you have an idea what the hell they're trying to do, maybe, right? So, and you can compare it to your own thinking and so on. So I would like to, and if you have an idea of somebody else doing something like this that would benefit from a deconstruction, maybe, then let me know. I would certainly like to, whenever I'm finished with this one, I would like to have a new thing, get that going, right? Okay, I spent 20 minutes talking to myself now. Let me get into deconstructing Keith Frankish here, right? So, let me just have a sip of my coffee. Oh, by the way, there's not much light on my picture there. It's because we're in this sort of early morning and it's sort of very gray weather today. So the light sensitivity of my laptop camera isn't that high. So I'm a little, murky in the picture. So I hope it will improve so you can see my extremely handsome, presence. Okay, let's dive in. Rock on, Keith.
For phenomenal realists, and let me just spell that out a little bit. So here's the picture we have again.
No,
phenomenal.
Not that one again. So now he's added some other stuff to the picture, right? It's like, and that's annoying. When you present something, I mean, you can sort of evolve it maybe from picture to picture, but I get a very strong suspicion that you are creating something that people might understand, and because they understand it, when you then add something new to it, they are more likely to accept it as an addition to your, rather than giving you the whole picture and to get an overview of that, and then sort of say, no, that doesn't fit, or that doesn't fit. It's sort of, it feels like a implicit sophistry, right? I don't think it's deliberate. I just think he's just a confused person, right? He has been gaslighted in academia for so many years that, or gaslighting himself, or, thinking that, it's like, I'm not exactly sure what words to put on. It's like a special mental case, a live presentation of what it's like to be an academic, right? Sort of the mental state that an academic is in. That's what I sort of, it's sort of an insight into the state of academia, you could say, right? It's also quite solemn, or it feels like he's sitting in his little bubble, basically talking to himself, and then hoping that somebody else might think, oh, there might be something to this, right? And he's just talking to himself. He's not trying to invite me into the thinking, right? He's just there's this distance in it, right? It feels unemotional. It doesn't. There's sort of a British. That's also, maybe I'm a bit prejudiced there, but the British, more than usual among people, seem to have this cold distance to things. Yes, jolly good. Yes, yeah, okay, yes. This kind of you shouldn't get. You should be stoic, or you shouldn't be easily rattled or anything like that, right? It's sort of this keeping up appearances or something like that, right? I just get that notion with this guy, and he's obviously British, so he has a bit of that, right? It feels like he's afraid that he might be found out, something like that. It feels like he's sort of, he's throwing up a bit of of cherry-picked arguments, and then quickly scurrying away afterwards, right? Sort of, he's very, one of the, was it the start of this presentation where he said something like, well, I guess my argument isn't perfect, and you could always, but at least you can't refute it completely. He's basically laying down and saying, I'm not worthy, right? I don't really have anything, but I'm going to spend 6 hours trying to illuminate you about it anyway, right? Well, maybe you should, go back to reality and try to work there, right? Sitting in academia all your life is not going to start up the functioning parts of your brain where you get to some conclusions you need to go to. I think there's you need to inflict yourself with other kinds of thinking and experiences with the other people and the world, and doing stuff that triggers thinking in your mind. If you're locked in academia, it's a kind of mind control, right? You will never get to good philosophy being stuck in academia. If I was you, Keith Frankish, I would quit this professor. Oh, you're already feeling, oh no, how do I? But I have a very nice living here on Crete. I can eat pickles all day and make, weird, presentations. It's an easy life. Yeah, maybe that's the problem, right? Maybe that's the problem. Go out in the real world. Take up some challenges, right? Start your own fucking philosophy company or whatever. Do something where you inflict your philosophy on the world, right? Instead of sitting there in your ivory tower fabulating about all sorts of shit that will always make sense to you because it's never challenged. And at least not by yourself, right?
Reports judgments fully explained by introspective process in the brain. We have phenomenal consciousness that correlates with and realizes those introspective processes and the states that they target. And then we have a subject, a self, who is acquainted with their own phenomenal consciousness. And that where acquaintance here is this simple, primitive relation. And what...
What is this subject outside the brain or what? Is it pointing to some lower end? How does these arrows and these bubbles, how do they function within this brain of yours? You have presented subject as being outside the brain. If you're saying that mind is inside the brain, then the subject also has to be inside the brain. Otherwise, I don't get it, right? And phenomenal consciousness, is that also, or are these arrows just to point out that they're going on inside there? I just don't have place in my, picture of the brain because of these big red and green arrows. It has to be clear what you're talking about and where things are in this presentation. It's fucking important. The subject cannot be outside the brain, right? And if you need that to be inside that picture, well, why didn't you make the brain larger to accommodate it? To make sure that people understand what you're saying, right? This is ridiculously badly argued, right?
What is the subject? Who or what is the subject? I'll suggest three possible answers here. One is, well, it's just the brain. Somehow the brain itself is acquainted with these.
It is like, I'm sorry that I'm cutting in and so on, but this is my deconstruction. Do one yourself, right? It's clearly that he thinks of himself sitting outside looking at his own brain. He has abstracted himself and sitting in God mode and sort of putting the pieces together from the outside of this brain of his. What he needs to realize is he's always sitting from the inside. Right? He is inside his experience and it's limited to the experience. If he claims there's something outside that experience, he cannot have access to that outside, at least not directly. He can claim that some of the experiences on the inside of that mind is a representation of something outside. Fine, I would also go with that. But he needs to state clearly, this is an axiom. This is not something I can reason towards, right? I cannot reason to QED or mathematics or proving it or whatever, right? There's no proof. There's nothing about your experience that says this must be something outside my mind, right? This must be a representation outside mine. And let alone being the exact thing outside that is also inside, right? These levels, he hasn't even recognized there is a problem here, right? So, by this account alone, everybody who is not clearly refuting or rejecting physicalism or illusionism or sort of non-idealist approaches, right? I wouldn't say at this point I'm an idealist, but it depends on the definition, right? I'm somewhere stuck in the middle. maybe a dualist when it all comes down, right? Which is the most hated version of all. That it's like it's much easier to look for these telling signals, and then you can just reject the rest. It doesn't matter what he's saying, right? If somebody is saying, I'm making a pizza, right? And you see a ply of wood, a circular piece of wood, and they are topping it with cheese and tomato and, whatever, ham and pineapple and whatever. You're going to say, well, no, I don't care how much nice filling you're putting a topping on this pizza. It's not the dough is a piece of wood, right? It doesn't matter how elaborate you tell me about the toppings on this pizza. The foundations is wood. I don't care about the rest, right? In this sense, if you can identify this particular contradiction within the implications of what he says, from the implications, you basically can just reject the rest. Because it's not going to be... Maybe even if there's some of it that is correct, it's more coincidental, or should be treated as such, rather than well argued, because it can't be well argued. There's a contradiction or a paradox built into the foundation, right? So this guy is never going to crack it, and he doesn't even know it, right? He doesn't even understand it. And he might also be thinking, well, what are these crazy people talking about, right? What are they talking about? There's a world you can't get to or something like that, right? What are they saying? They're crazy, man, right? It's because he doesn't understand the foundations.
These phenomenal properties. So the brain here, considered as a complex cognitive system, a system for processing information and generating reactions. That's
processing information. How do you know X is information? Now it's a new term. Maybe has mentioned information before, but it's like, and also these who suffers from this problem of materialist understanding, they think that they have access to that which becomes the experience before it becomes the experience, not realizing you actually need the experience in order to have anything. It's not before it becomes an experience that you have access to anything. And this starts out being qualia, right? And then, because they think they have this insight of what is going on before the qualia, they don't need the qualia. Oh man, it's crazy when you can see it, right? And they think that people like me are crazy because they don't understand this contradiction, right? And it's sort of this naive realism that you would have to let go of when you think about it, right? But it's built into, common thinking. It's how you grow up. It's how you get used to treating your experience as if it is the actual outside you're experiencing, right? But it can't be. It's impossible, right? It's simply impossible. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't both say it's an outside and an inside at the same time and it's the same thing, right? It can't be. It just doesn't hang together. It's fallaciously, if you see it from a sort of a logical point of view, right? And then he ends up creating this 6 hour, mumbo jumbo of all sorts of weird arrows that, words that, it's like, oh, give me a fucking break, man, right? Oh, man. And if there's something very important and insightful in there, it's covered up by all this fluff. I'm going to miss it because it's so unfocused, right? Okay.
Hugely complex.
I'm repeating myself.
Information processing and control system described by cognitive science, and somehow that system is acquainted with phenomenal with the phenomenal properties that are associated with its own states. Okay, so we have the brain doing its stuff, its information processing with perception and introspection and so on. Some of those states are correlated with phenomenally conscious states, and somehow the brain is immediately acquainted with those phenomenally conscious states. Now, the question here, I think, is, well, how could that happen? How could all that immense functional complexity interface with simple phenomenal properties? How do you get that immensely complicated informational processing and control system to interface in this direct, unmediated way with simple phenomenal properties? It seems quite mysterious and almost magical. So how can the brain do this? How could the brain be acquainted with these simple phenomenal properties? It can't be by representing them. The brain is a representational system. The way that it works.
It's also annoying when somebody argues this way, right? It's polemic, or what's the word, right? It's annoying. It's like, would you like to get the answer to this? Okay, but first I'm going to tell you, it's not this. This is not the answer. Would you like the answer? Yeah, I would like the answer. Okay, but it's not this. Get the fuck out of my face, man, right? Can I get the... Let me see if I can read it. But how does this functional complexity interface with the simple question mark? Well, not by representing them. Yeah. Do you want the answer, right? Right? Yes. Give me the answer. But it's not this. It encapsulates academia so perfectly, right? It's like, would you like the answer? No, but I'm going to spend time telling you what it isn't. Right? Fuck off, man. Right? Sucks.
It responds to the environment is by constructing representations of features of the environment and then using them to control reactions. But that can't be how it interfaces with phenomenal consciousness, since representation is not a simple primitive relation, as acquaintance is supposed to be. Representation it involves physical symbols that are sensitive to states of the world and have certain causal effects on the rest of the system. But that's not a simple relation. It's a relation that that is mediated, and it's a relation that can go wrong, that can misfire. Where there's representation, there can be misrepresentation. So this doesn't seem a very attractive option. Again, this recalls the discussion of nomological danglers earlier. It's a question about the relation between.
He is placing that phenomenal consciousness in that pink rose bubble out there, right? As if it's something that's already halfway removed from the important stuff that is rational mind stuff going on there, right? And this weird colors and sounds, it's just something floating. It's already halfway outside your brain. Actually, it's outside your brain, right? So just get rid of it. And so we have this nice inside the brain, within the confinements of right thinking, right? Give me a break, man. I really hate this drawing he's doing it. It's so fucking annoyingly bad, right? I mean, I can't believe how bad this is. I have said this before, right? I have lost if I had little respect for what he was trying to do, I have lost it now, right? I mean, he is sort of, circle jerking himself in his weird abstraction, right? I mean, it's awful philosophy, this. Why are people like this financed, right? Why are they given professorships? Is it because they're too stupid to do good philosophy? And that's what they need. They need to protect themselves against good philosophy by pushing stupid philosophy like this, so they can keep gatekeeping good philosophy from arriving into bad philosophy, because bad philosophy is needed to make sure that they can get the dough from the government, right? I mean, I can't help connecting the dots this way, because this sucks like a fucking intergalactic vacuum, right? It's awful, man. Oh, it's bad.
Highly complex activity and physical activity in the brain, and these simple phenomenal properties, non-physical phenomenal properties. Here the question is how the brain could know them, could know these properties, could have access to these properties, and moreover, how any access it had could have physical effects if the phenomenal properties themselves are non-physical. Again, this would seem to threaten.
Phenomenal properties are non-physical. I mean, what does it mean that it's physical? He hasn't explained that either. How do you get to physical? And what does it then mean that it's non-physical? You're talking, I mean, if you're trying to refute something, you can't just be inventing something that isn't established philosophically and then try to refute it. Why are you trying to refute something that isn't there? It's like, but if it's an illusion, why are you dealing with it actually, right? Why do you have to? Is it because people are believing in an illusion, and you have to convince them that they shouldn't? I mean, it's just a weird argument, right? And calling himself an illusionist is, as I pointed out in the previous, or maybe 2 parts back, right? That he's basing his philosophy on something that shouldn't be taken seriously. I am the philosophy that are not taking this seriously. What kind of philosophy is that, right? I'm basing my business on not selling banana. Fuck me, man, right? Oh.
The causal closure of the physical. Okay, so I don't think that option is very elegant or attractive. Maybe there are some ways of making it work. The philosopher Sam Coleman has some ideas here, but it certainly looks a problematic picture, I think. Okay, so another option for the subject is that it's an immaterial soul.
What?
So we're back to something like Cartesian dualism. And it has a sort of elegance to it. If phenomenal properties are simple, primitive properties, and acquaintance is a simple primitive relation, then maybe the subject that's aware of phenomenal properties, should also be a simple primitive thing, a soul. And actually, this might be the best way of underwriting this this kind of phenomenal realism. But it is a very
But again, he's placing this outside the brain. Why is he doing that? Is it because his graphics just doesn't fit or what? And that's fucking stupid to just say, well, I'm going to place it outside the brain, right? So would you be clear about what goes on inside this brain of yours and what goes on outside? I mean, it's not clear, right? And just placing bubbles here and there, it's like, what are you doing, man? Oh my God. And also the term soul is very connected with religion, right? And particularly Christianity, I would think, right? It's not the best term to use, I would say, because all the Christians would say, yes, soul, and then yes, the Bible, right? And then God, right? Yes, and then I can be Christian, right? And then I'm not going to challenge mommy, right? But it's dualists then, right? I don't like you. You don't just ignore qualia. I don't buy it, right? I don't buy it. And certainly not because I seem to be using these qualia all the time. All the time, right? If I want to take a sip of my coffee and I find out it's blue, I would say, I'm not going to drink that. But it's brown as I expect it to be, so I'm going to drink it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to die from it, but I find it more likely that I'm going to die from it if it's blue, right? I need my fucking qualia, man, to understand the qualities of my living. I mean, don't you understand? This is important. You can't just say, I think I might have something here, and there's a soul out there somewhere, and a pink bubble there, and the circle arrows going like this inside the brain, and then some arrows here, and oh man, fucking go away with this shit, right? Somebody defund this idiot, right? Please, man. Yes, he can sit in his spare time and do this kind of philosophy when he gets home from his night shift, right? Making minimum wage or whatever. Then he can do this PowerPoint show on his laptop and present it on YouTube. It's free to do it on YouTube, right? And you can use StreamYard or whatever, or this free streaming software I'm using to create whatever. You can create elaborate stuff for very, very little money. You don't need a professorship to do this shit, right?
Radical option, and of course it's wholly unexplanatory. It doesn't. Once we brought the soul into the picture, we brought in something that's quite beyond scientific explanation, and we can theorize about it and construct metaphysical theories of it, but really we've now taken consciousness, I think, right out of the realm of science. Well,
the realm of science? What is a realm? And these eyebrows he has that goes up and down like this. I read somewhere that psychopaths tend to have very mobile eyebrows. I'm not saying that everybody who has that is a psychopath, but it's like it helps, give an illusion of empathy, apparently, right? Something like that. I'm just these eyebrows that goes like I'm confused by them, right? It looks there was an old TV a movie series in Denmark in the 50s, right? When in modern day, and it was single dad to 4 children, right? It was called far til 4 in Danish. A daddy to 4, right? A father with 4 children. And it was also how stupid men are, and the oldest daughter need to take care of things in the household to make sure that, because daddy is too stupid, right? It's sort of male bashing. It was already starting in the 50s, right? But this person, daddy-o there, he had these exact eyebrows. Just he's like a spitting image of this. I don't remember what the name of the father there was. It's been a while since I watched them, right? But it's like I might find a picture of it, right? It's actually incredible. Let me find it just to prove my point. Far til 4. Father of 4 in English, apparently. I didn't know that. Oh man, and they have been reinvented in the 90s and the zeros. Let me see if I can get Ib Schönberg played the father. Basically, why is there a picture of him? hang on. I'm sorry. With the Streamlabs picture open, it takes a bit of. There he is with his youngest son, little pair. Let me see. Come on. Oh man, it's slow. Okay. Give me a break, man. Come on. There it is. This one. How about that? I guess Keith Frankish is a fan of Father of Four, right? Okay, just kidding. Well, let me switch back and let me see. There he is. Father of Four. Okay, enough of that shit.
I, for one, am reluctant to do that, at least at this stage. Okay, so let's look now at a third option. This is somewhat similar to the first one in that the brain is the subject. But the idea here is...
No. The brain is an experience, right? You need qualia in order to get to an understanding of brain. If you didn't have qualia, how would you understand brain? Have you looked at your own brain? How do you know you have a brain? I'm not saying you're stupid in this way, but have you looked at your own brain? Do you know there's a brain inside you somewhere? Or is it, where is it? Compared to your experience. Don't you need some kind of experience in order to get an idea of brain in the first place? So if mind is encompassed by brain, how does mind get to brain? Because brain needed to be there in order to mind, for mind to be there or something, right? You're taking so much for granted here as given to you. You can't do that. That's bad philosophy, right? You don't get it, man.
It's rather different. It's not that we're not thinking of the brain as a complex cognitive system that is somehow interfacing with distinct phenomenal properties. It's that the phenomenal properties are the intrinsic nature of the brain itself, considered simply as a physical object. So the idea is that some physical objects have an intrinsic nature.
Okay, so what I think he's trying to do is like, if you're saying, okay, the motor in my car is the sounds, there's a weird sound, that's the motor. And then you say, yeah, but that's not really the motor. The sound is just an effect of the motor, right? The sound of the motor is not important. It's the goings on, the tubing and the cylinders and whatever, axles and what is it called, right? That's the motor. So he's saying that whatever goes on in that brain of his, these colors and sounds are just sort of weird side effects that are not important. He already knows what is going on there. He doesn't need to look and hear and see and taste and smell, right? It's incredible that you can corner yourself into a thinking like this, right? I think there's somebody some guy, I don't remember the name, but some guy who called illusionism the strangest philosophy of them all, right? And I really get the point he was trying to say that this is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. It's incredible that you can elaborate so much on something that is so faulty, right? And he can't even spot it. And he's willing to go out there and telling the world about it, right? Well, maybe it's a good thing that we actually know how stupid it is by him sitting here presenting it, right? So at least that's a good spin-off. And I get to deconstruct it and tell you how ridiculous I find it, right? Okay, let's head in.
That is phenomenal. It's intrinsically like something to be that physical object. And maybe this phenomenal nature is the basis of all the physical characteristics of the object, all the physical properties of the object. I've called this intrinsic subjectivity. So the idea is there isn't the brain and the phenomenal properties distinct from it. It's that the brain is intrinsically a phenomenal thing. So this is a sort of view that that goes along naturally with panpsychism. So the panpsychist thinks of fundamental physical particles as having a...
What I still lack is some kind of elaboration on why the hell are they there? Or why the hell am I aware of these qualia? You could say that the qualia is weird, but in order for you to talk about qualia, you need to be able to be aware of the qualia, right? And then why is my mind spending effort on being aware of these qualia and apparently, cognizing and all sorts of stuff with these qualia, from these qualia, if they're not important, if they're an illusion, if they're misleading potentially? Why the hell is a mind doing this, right? And if he's just going to say, well, I don't know, it's just a weird coincidence, then fuck you, man, right? Because you needed, in my opinion, you needed those qualia in order to get these arrows and texts and, whatever, right? You needed to walk to the school. You need to sit down and open your eyes and open your ears and get that stupid idiot teacher to force feed you stuff, right? Using your qualia. You didn't become an academic without using your qualia. Give me a fucking break, man, right? Otherwise, let me know how you did it, right? And now you're going to tell me after 40, 50, 60 years of using qualia that I shouldn't take qualia seriously, man. Ah, man. This is triggering, right? Holy shit, man.
An intrinsic phenomenal nature that grounds the properties described by physics. And the idea is that when you put these particles together in a complex enough way, the structure created comes to have an intrinsic phenomenal nature, which is inherited or
I'm cutting in again, right? It just seems to me to, just solidifying my thinking that if you let go of your qualia and your experience, it's like anything goes, right? If you can anchor your philosophy in direct experience, it's just, I'll just cherry picking whatever I want to be the case, basically, right? Then he's throwing around words and terms and abstractions and acquaintance and phenomenal and judgment and report and explanations and correlations and realization, subject and brain and considerations, physicality and object. All these just intrinsic, it's just thrown in one big pile, and then let me make some arrows, and then, see, I solved it. But what about my direct experience? No, you can't trust that. You just listen to my abstractions, right? If it's not anchored in direct experience, forget about it, right? I will be that straight up and say it like this. My conclusion at this point is, if it's not anchored in direct experience, which is qualia, in my opinion, then fuck it, right? Get the fuck out of my face with your shit, right? Because you want to disconnect from something that I can experience directly and relate to directly, so that you can screw with my mind and try to implement all sorts of weird shit because you want to connect the dots in a certain way because that suits your needs, right? Get the fuck out of my face with this shit, man, right? Actually, it's sort of contradictory. I like to be able to deconstruct it, but then get the fuck out of my face, right? I had to give him some credit where his credit is due, that he's actually sit down and done this, right? He's being paid a professor wage, right? Possibly twice as much as I earn in the free market, right? And I have to be forced to pay for it some way or another, right? Or at least some people are forced to pay for it without their say so. So I will always be a proponent of those who would want your service are those who should pay for it, right? And if they don't want to pay for it, it's because they don't want your service, right? So you should go away with that service and find somebody else who actually wants to pay for it, right? Forcing people to pay for something is destroying value. Because the only signal you can have of whether or not somebody is valuing your shit is that they freely come and pay for it, right? This is the only measure stick for whether or not you're creating value. That is why the free market is based on profits. Because profits tell you that you're creating value, right? Professors, well, you could say this if it's a free market university, I don't know why, they're all soaked in government shit, right? So one way or another, they are dependent on government. I will stand by that any day, right? But some are more, free market universities than others. I don't know his status, right? But at least he's rubbing shoulders with professors from completely governmentally funded stuff, right? It's the only measure stick of whether or not you're creating value. And if you're not working in a free market situation, it's as good as certain that people don't want to pay for your shit, right? Because you want them to be forced to pay for it. It's the same as saying, my shit isn't worth anything, right? I need to force people to pay for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making a living of it, right? And then you're sort of, but we need thinkers, and we need this, and we need that. Okay, fine, but you can do that thinking in your spare time just as I'm doing, right? Have a full-time job and then go in the evenings or in the mornings and do some philosophy. Present it on YouTube. It's basically free. You don't need a professor wage to do this shit, right? Oh, man. And Moscow, the center of communism for 90 years, man, or for 80, 70 years, right? They're using this shit, man, right? Wake the fuck up, man. You had communism for 70 years. You should understand this bullshit, right?
Created from the combination of the intrinsic phenomenal natures of its components. So on this, you don't need any interface between the brain and its phenomenal properties. The acquaintance here is just a relation between an object and its own intrinsic nature. It's just what it is itself. Now, so I suppose so. This is a possible view, but I don't find it a very attractive one. It's not clear to me that it does anything to justify phenomenal realism. Without any interface between consciousness and the rest of cognition, phenomenal consciousness and the rest of cognition, without any way in which there's no mechanism on this view by which phenomenal consciousness can affect any psychological processes.
Now he mentions cognition. Now, it's been a long while now, but I think it's the first time he mentions cognition, or at least in some direct reference to what he's trying to say at the moment. Now, how do you explain cognition then? What are you cognizing from? Right? If you're experiencing elephant, the elephant is not traveling from an outside through your eyes and then representing itself inside your mind as a fully grown elephant, one-to-one with some elephant outside, right? You don't have an elephant sense or a beaver sense or it's, bus, bicycle sense where bicycles arrive through. It comes from the inside by cognizing from the qualia, right? The qualia needed to be there in order for your soul or whatever you called it to be able to cognize from it. Because if the elephant could arrive without qualia, why would you need qualia in the first place? Because elephant is what you want to get to, not the color of the elephant. It doesn't matter if it's light brown or grayish brown or brownish gray or whatever, right? It's that it's an elephant that is important to you, right? That's where you get to what the hell should I do about it, right? It's not the color gray or anything like that spurs you into doing something. It's the fact that it cognizes into an elephant. That's when you get to do something, right? So how does that elephant arrive? Does it circumvent qualia or what? Right? Yeah, have you thought about this? What the hell are you doing, man? Right? Oh.
There's no interface with the representational processes in the brain. And so the brain's own intrinsic nature and its own acquaintance with its intrinsic nature would make no difference at all to any of any processes, any psychological processes, or any beliefs or reactions, or other any beliefs or judgments or other reactions we might have. So this is a metaphysical theory designed to underwrite our conviction that phenomenal realism is true in the face of the debunking argument. But if that conviction itself can be fully explained in terms of introspective processes, as the debunking argument claims, then it seems to me that this sort of metaphysical speculation really isn't.
The reason you had introspection in the first place is because you have qualia and cognitions, right? That's why you introspect. It's the introspection and all that goes on after the fact or after experience is because of experience. Your ability to meta-think or philosophize is a spin-off of experiences, right? How else would you make sense of it? And now, because you can meta-think, now you say, well, now I don't need the qualia. It's kind of arrogant in a way, right? It's sort of an, I hesitate to use the term academic again, but, stay with me, right? Academic arrogance is like, no, I'm living in my cloud castles. I have distracted myself from the everyday, qualia, which is just sort of simple stuff for the little people, right? Ugh. Oh, man.
Isn't justified. Now, I'm not saying that none of these options are possible or coherent. What I want to do is to point out that if you wish to hold on to phenomenal realism in the face of the debunking argument, then you're going to have to endorse one of these options or something similar. There's a cost, a heavy theoretical cost to maintaining phenomenal realism in the face of the debunking argument. So you're either going to have to say that the debunking argument doesn't work or pay some high theoretical cost to maintain your phenomenal realism in the face of it.
Yes, but now he is sort of, now he creates a fork in the road, right? But this is bad arguing, right? Because all he has established from hitherto, right, is based on faulty understanding of his experience. So this fork in the road he has created is in order to lure you in, you need to make this decision. It's sort of the same trick as the trolley problem, right? So moving all sorts of other decisions aside and all sorts, you have perfect knowledge and all sorts, and make this decision now. Oh, you can't make the decision, so we need a government, right? Right?
Okay, so that's the debunking argument for illusionism. Now, let me quickly run through a couple more arguments before we end this lecture. Okay, so let's.
So that was the debunking argument? I mean, I'm confused, right? It's like it's stretched out so far, so I can't. Now, I'm in a deconstruction scenario here, so it doesn't help me keep the overview because I'm constantly talking about my own, approach to this and comparing it to his thinking. So I'm not in an overview scenario in the first place, but the way it's structured, so this was the argument. Okay. So I waited, almost 2 hours to get the notion. Okay, this was the argument. So was the argument, the previous 2 hours or what? Or was it just this last picture or what? Where is the argument? Can't you just say, okay, this slide is the argument. This is the argument, and it's formulated this way. Stay focused on that, right? No, it's all this gray area fluff of words that is so. And then he says, this was the argument, right? And it was also a fork in the road, apparently, that was the argument. A fork in the road cannot be an argument, right? I mean, what the fuck, man? Okay, I went over the 1 hour mark. I'm 1 hour and 10 minutes or 11 minutes now, right? So it's, I mean, and there's still, okay, this was the debunking. Was debunking the argument against Quayle? I'm just lost track of this argument, right? But there's still like 20, almost half an hour left of this. What are some other arguments? What are those, man? Well, what could it possibly be, man? Oh, man. What is that? No wonder that the world is going down the drain with philosophers like this. It's like, oh, man. We're doomed, man. Okay, share, like, and subscribe, please, right? Consider joining the Discord board, link below, hopefully, possibly. And give me a comment, let me know you have any ideas. And otherwise, see you in the next one.